Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's first story is called EM Claims Daughter Had a Stroke to Get into ER Faster. This story is by a broke, depressed girl. Let's get straight into the story, guys. Let's do this. I was at the ER a year or so ago for something I was honestly annoyed my family doctor and pharmacist told me to go for. I was sitting with my parents and a man in his 60s comes in yelling at this triage nurse that his wife had a stroke and demanded to see her even though the doctor hadn't finished her assessment. So he's sitting there all jacked up and he explains the stroke symptoms to EM. EM then goes to the triage nurse. EM, excuse me, my 10-year-old daughter is having a stroke. Nurse, oh no, does she have the symptoms? EM explains the symptoms to nurse. Nurse, I'm sorry to hear this, but you have to wait your turn like everyone else. EM, how dare you make her wait when she's having a stroke? And stomps back into the waiting room. She starts calling all her friends, screaming about her 10-year-old daughter is having a stroke. At this point, I felt honestly kind of bad for the woman. I spoke up, apologized for eavesdropping, but told her that it honestly was the same symptoms as a migraine. EM, how dare you accuse me of lying? She's having a stroke. Stop trying to tell me different because you want to be bumped ahead of her, you stupid millennial. I just ignored her at this point. Ironically enough, I got in ahead of the daughter because I was deemed higher priority. Her daughter was on the other side of the curtain from me. I heard her still fuming that nobody was taking her stroke seriously, threatening to sue the hospital for letting me go ahead of her. Turns out I was right. The kid had a migraine and they gave her children's Advil and told her to sleep it off. The daughter was feeling 100% better an hour later. This story is called Crazy Aunt Becomes Enemies with Family. This story is by Kelly Dope. I'm sorry if I pronounced that name wrong, but here we go, let's get into this story. Hey, long time reader, first time poster. So, I've actually been reminded of this story I've had tucked away in my brain for a while. It happened like several years ago, so I'll try to remember the details as clear as possible, but most of it will be retelling of what my mum has told me rather than myself remembering, if that makes sense. Most of this will be describing rather than actual dialogue, as I don't remember a whole lot, but this family's friend's sister-in-law was definitely entitled AF. I've already added the TLDR at the bottom for those in a hurry as well. So a little context. My immediate family of 4, me, my mum, my dad, and my younger brother, are pretty close. A sort of, you insult one of us, you insult all of us kind of deal. It's great. I love my family very much. But this detail isn't exactly imperative to the whole story. Anyway, my dad grew up with a mate, and his mate's brother and wife are 2 people we don't get along with very well. Thus, the origin of the story. At the time of the incident, we were sitting on a pretty okay terms with them. I swear the brother had anger issues and the wife was just as entitled be. So, when their daughter was turning like 1 or 2, we were naturally invited along to the party. At the time, my brother was no older than 5, but I'd assume he was around 3. This is important. And that would mean I was in the 8 to 10 range. We are a homegrown Australian, and Aussie kids are pretty rowdy and wild, so it was no surprise to anyone that my brother was a runner with the energy of a nuclear power plant. The brother and his wife lived in a few acre land in a bush and had no signage up in or around the house telling kids not to go places. There were a lot of various age groups, so naturally you'd have screaming kids from one end of the property to the other. According to what I vaguely remember, while I was outside winning a game of piñata, my brother was running around the front of the large house chasing some kids we'd only met that day. He turned around a corner and accidentally bumped into a cabinet and a vase fell on the floor and smashed. Kids do accidents like this all the time, and in my family, a grub reprimand and an assurance that it was just an accident is better than screaming at this poor child who'd never encountered a situation like this before. But clearly our families were on different wavelengths. The sister-in-law, now continuously referred to as EA, entitled auntie, heard the noise and rushed over to it, finding my brother probably freaking out about the mess and trying to clean it up. He'd called for my mum as well, as he wasn't the kind of kid to freak out and run from the issue, like what I probably would have done lol. But instead of my mum, EA had turned around and saw the mess and immediately went batshit crazy. Dollar fed mode. She started screeching at him from the top of her lungs, yelling at him for breaking a vase that she obviously thought was on purpose. Please note that my brother was a goddamn 3 at the time of this accident. This is probably his first ever encounter with a situation like this, so essentially, he did what any old child would do. He cried. My mum seriously didn't like this, because she raced up to the scene where EA was screaming at her little boy. So with the age of 1,000 mothers, she scooped up my brother and responded as calmly but as firmly as she could, warning her to never yell at my brother like that again, and that what happened was accident and purely that. I have no idea whether we reimbursed her for the vase, but I have a feeling with the way we were treated that past, we didn't even bother. In their heated argument, according to my mum, she said that EA spent much of her anger insulting our family, and how much my mum raised both me and my brother as essentially wild people. To be honest, I don't think she really has any clue on what sort of kids are like, and what things are hectic and crazy, and some stuff is either gonna go missing or get broken, but hey, you have your parental methods and we have ours. I think the main issue was that EA was insulting my mum and her skills as a parent, which are wonderful, I would add. She's a terrific mother. After this brief spit fight, mum essentially dragged my dad out of the house, collected me, and drove us home, stopping of course to say goodbye to people we actually liked at the time. Needless to say, we cut our ties with that family, and funnily enough, my dad's mate and his brother got into a heated argument a few months later that cut their ties too. I would love to say that that was the end of ever seeing that rather unpleasant family, but that's not quite the case. The two brothers one day magically healed a lifetime of issues and troubles, and now they're best friends as if nothing had happened. And seriously, stuff really hit the fan with that family. We had to see them again at my dad's mate's 50th birthday party, and it seemed they still resented us because of the whole few hours we spent at the party. They never said a word to us. Pleasant hosts they were. Thinking back on it now, I'm actually related to so many stuck-up relatives and in-laws, but I don't exactly have an exact moment to recount. But if you'd like me to meet more of my family, I'd be happy to introduce you to them all. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you liked my story. This story is called EM Gets Mad at Volunteer Swim Instructor. This story is by the Moose2240. Let's get straight into it, guys. Background: I'm 15 at the time of volunteering at my local YMCA as a swimming instructor. More of an assistant because technically I'm not supposed to teach a class myself as I'm not 16 yet. I hadn't been working there long, so I wasn't sure what every level was capable of yet. Also, this story is more of what happened to my boss rather than me, but I think it stood cool go there. So we're already understaffed on instructors, and my buddy who was the actual teacher, we'll call him M, didn't show up. On top of that, he took the class's papers home, so he could check stuff off, and because of this, we didn't know who was in the class, or what they could and couldn't do. The class starts like 2 minutes late, because we were looking for M and the class papers. My boss just told me what level the class was, and to get all the students who I could find in that class in the pool. I gather all my kids by shouting out for that class to come to me and get them in. EM was already agitated that the class started late and was super mad that I was there instead of M. By the way, I could pass for an 18 to 19 year old. I kindly explained to her that M isn't here today and that I'd be taking his place. She watched me for a minute, then left. I started the kids off with some pretty basic stuff to see what they could do and how comfortable they all were in the water, which EM didn't like apparently. After class, I found out that EM was screaming and shouting at my boss for letting me teach the class, and it started a little late, and on top of that, how I couldn't even do my job correctly, because my daughter can do everything he had her doing. My boss responded by explaining that she is bad-mouthing a volunteer who is sacrificing his time and his money, I had to pay to take a instructor course, to teach your daughter to swim. He has them doing easy stuff so that he can see what they are capable of and keep them safe. EM apparently shut up and left. The little girl's dad came back to pick her up. What makes this even better is that the class loved me as their teacher. Okay guys, that is wrapping up for today's episode. I hope you did enjoy this episode of Entitled Parents. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, and come back tomorrow for the next episode of Reading Reddit.